Tooltips provide additional information when hovering over certain areas of our chart. For example, in the right chart, if I hover over the different columns that we have in our visual, I get information about the region and also the numeric value behind the population count. So here we have Asia and the population count. Same thing also works for Africa, Europe, and so on. In the left visual, this of course also works by default. If I hover over a certain area in the chart, this can be directly on the line or basically anywhere here onto one of the years, so to say. So as you can see, the year here basically is the, triggering event to display the tooltip. I get the information about the region and the corresponding population count. These values are displayed by default in the tooltip as this data is used in our visual, but by selecting a specific visual, we can also add more information as a tooltip. The tooltip is a dedicated area of the chart, a dedicated element, which can be found down here. And we could, for example, add the female population count to our visual. The female population is an interesting value because we created this measure, it is a measure in the end here, in two different ways. We created this measure with the calculate function in the first version, so to say, without using a filter function. The second version here used a filter. I'll come back to this in a few seconds. Let's first add the without filter measure, so to say, as a tooltip to our chart. By doing this, so by dragging and dropping this field to the tooltips area, we first get a changed headline of the visual. Now we have the population and the female population by year and region. And if I now again hover over my visual, I see that the female population is also displayed here. Please note that not all regions are displayed though now, because the tooltip has a limited space available. Therefore, some information is cut out when adding too many data as a tooltip. You might have seen though that our count here is not working perfectly, because if I hover over the different years here in my visual, then you see that the total population count for each region increases, whereas the female population, remains the same, which obviously is not correct. I'll come back to this problem in a few seconds. Let's first add also the female population created with the filter function as a tooltip. Because as I said, we can add multiple fields as tooltip, so now this is also added. Again, the headline changed, but if I hover over my chart again, you see that my tooltip didn't change. So the female population filter field is not displayed. But wait a second, for the year 2020, this is not the case. Here, the female population field is represented in the tooltip. So we have two strange things here. The first thing is that the female population always remains the same for all years. The second strange thing is that the female population filter field is not displayed at all, but only displayed in the year 2020. Now, if you paid attention in the last module of this course, you probably know what causes the problem here. Because switching back to our data view once again, and there going to the fact population column, and for example selecting the female population measure, you see that we added the fact population year column as a filter. Specifically, we filter for the year 2020. So this explains the first problem. We are directly filtering for the female population in the year 2020, and this problem also occurs in the female population filter measure. Here we have this filtering condition, but this doesn't explain why the female population field is displayed in all data points, whereas the female population filter field is only displayed in the year 2020. It can be explained though by the fact that these two calculations, although resulting in the same value for the specific year 2020, work differently from an internal perspective in Power BI Desktop. The female population measure here, not using the filter function, simply returns a value following all these conditions. So no matter what year I select in my visual, I always get back the sum of the female population for the year 2020. No matter if I select the year 2020 or 2022, it always returns this value. The other approach though, so using the filter function, only returns a value if these conditions are met, meaning the gender ID is 2, so female, and the year is 2020. And these conditions are only met in the year 2020, which is the reason why here we get a result for the female population filter field, but for the other years this is not the case. Therefore, we can now easily fix both of our problems by removing this year filter from our measures. Therefore, let's go back to the data view, first select the female population, measure year, and let's delete this second filtering condition. Like this. And let's now do the same thing for the female population filter measure. Here we can delete the second filtering condition, including the double ampersand operator. So with that in place, and by switching back to the report view, we hopefully see that we now have data for all individual data points and also correctly changing data for all these data points. So this is how tooltips work, and this also showed us the difference between adding a filter as arguments in a function or adding it as a dedicated filter function to a function.